In this video, we will be looking at chapter 10, trigonometric functions, focusing on how do we calculate principal values. So this is one of the more harder concepts in this chapter. So I'll try to simplify this as much as I can. Okay, so in order to understand this first, we must first understand what does it mean for something to be a principal value. So in layman term, principal value just means the only angle your calculator will give you. So for example, let's say if I have these three trigonometric functions here, y equals to sine theta, whereby y is a value, theta is an angle, whether it's degree or radian. I can have these three different trigo functions here, and theta can be equals to sine inverse y, cosine inverse y, or tangent inverse y. Okay, take note that this theta here, this angle can have many different values. What do I mean by that? Let's look at one simple example. If I have sine theta equals to half, okay, therefore theta is simply the sine inverse of half. If you press this in your calculator, you should only get one answer, and the answer you should get should be 30 degrees. This is the principal value of sine inverse half. However, theta can have many different answers in order to get half. For example, theta can be 30 degrees. It can also be 390 degrees by adding one cycle. It can also be negative 330 degrees by minusing one cycle. If you press sine 390 degrees in your calculator or sine negative 330, you will all get half. And therefore, this is what I mean by theta can have many different values, but your calculator will only show you one value, and this value here is called the principal value of this sine inverse half. Okay, so just to elaborate a bit more, so if you key in sine inverse half here, you will only get the principal value of sine inverse half in your calculator, and this is what we call principal value. In your calculator, the principal value range, and something that you must memorize, is that for any sine inverse function, the angle must lie between negative 90 degree to 90 degree inclusive. If it's cosine inverse function, it will be from 0 degree to 180 degrees. And if it's tangent inverse function, negative 90, between negative 90 as well as 90, not including the 90 degrees. Okay, so let's go a bit further into why is it like that. Okay, if you look at the graph of the different trigo functions, let's first look at the graph of y equals to sine theta. As you know, your sine theta graph looks something like this. Okay, the principal value interval is when the angle for your calculator to give you a solution is that the sine inverse y, or your angle theta, I can rewrite this part here, the principal value interval, or theta, must be between negative 90 and 90 degrees. Why is it like that? If you were to analyze the graph, we know that for any sine function or any trigo function, for sine or cosine, the minimum value is negative 1, the maximum value is 1. So therefore, in order for your calculator to give you the most simplified version, your calculator will decide the range to be between negative 90 all the way to 90. So this is the possible principal value interval, whereby the angle you will get will be between negative 90 all the way to 90 in order to cover all the possible y values from negative 1 all the way to 1. Then you notice after that, it is just repeating already, and to get all this is basically another cycle, just adding one cycle, etc. Okay, so therefore, in this case over here, the principal value for sine theta is the angle sine inverse theta is between negative 90 to 90 degree. And similarly, for cosine theta, we note that the principal value interval is between 0 to 180 degrees. And why is it different? It's because for cosine theta, because we know that for sine and cosine, the maximum and minimum value is negative 1 and 1. In order for the y values to be covered fully, I cannot just take negative 90 to 90 degree, because this only covers positive y value. Instead, I also need to cover the 0 to negative 1 for the y value here, which is why for the principal value interval, we decide to fix it from 0 degrees all the way to 180 degrees. Okay, so that is why sine and cosine, the principal value interval is different. For cosine, it is between 0 degrees and 180 degrees for the angle. Okay, And lastly, for tangent theta, okay, tangent theta, we will take the same range as sine theta, but take note that for tangent, at 90 degrees and negative 90 degrees, this is a asymptote. So therefore, in order for one cycle to cover all your y values, it will be from negative 90 all the way to 90, excluding the end points of this interval. Okay, so therefore for tangent theta, the interval will be from negative 90, excluding these two endpoints between negative 90 to 90 degrees. Alright, so this is how we get the ranges for principal values for these three trigo functions. And lastly, let's look at some simple examples of how to solve questions. Very easy. For example, questions can be, find the principal value of this sine inverse function here. All you need to do is to press this in your calculator and tell you what is the angle your calculator calculates when you key this into your calculator. And simply, this will be simply negative 60 degrees if you key this into your calculator. Okay. And the last one, let's say if I have cosine inverse negative half, find the principal value. The question is just asking you to find what is the angle that your calculator uses to calculate this value here. So you just need to key this in your calculator and you should get 120 degrees.